It's a warm evening in Florence, 1440. You're a servant in the household of a powerful merchant family. Your master has just handed you a small leather pouch containing a fine, white powder. It looks like sugar. It dissolves in wine without a trace. It has no taste, no smell, no color. He tells you to sprinkle it into the soup being prepared for tonight's dinner guest, a rival who's been undercutting his trade routes for years. You know what this powder is. Everyone in Florence knows. It's arsenic. And if you're caught, you won't just be executed. You'll be boiled alive. Welcome to the world of the medieval poisoner. It's not the world of cloaked assassins and exotic potions that movies have sold you. It's far more disturbing than that. Because in the Middle Ages, poison wasn't the weapon of shadowy professionals. It was the weapon of cooks, servants, wives, priests, and popes. And the line between the person who healed you and the person who killed you was often the same individual, standing behind the same counter, selling you the same substance. Today, we're going deep into what life was actually like for those who dealt in poison during the medieval period. Who they were, what they used, how they got away with it, and what happened when they didn't. The medieval poisoner's arsenal. If you wanted to kill someone with poison in medieval Europe, you didn't need to venture into some forbidden underground market. You walked into an apothecary shop, the medieval equivalent of a pharmacy, and bought what you needed over the counter. Apothecaries sold substances that could heal in small doses and kill in large ones. The same arsenic used to treat wounds and skin conditions could destroy a person's internal organs if swallowed. The same monk's hood rubbed on aching joints as a painkiller could stop a heart in minutes if it entered the bloodstream. The same belladonna used to dilate a woman's pupils for beauty could shut down her nervous system entirely. This was the poisoner's greatest advantage. Nearly every lethal substance had a perfectly legitimate use. Arsenic was sold openly as rat poison. Hemlock was a sedative. Henbane eased toothaches. You could walk into a shop, buy enough poison to kill a dozen people, and your only explanation needed to be, "I have a rat problem." Arsenic was the undisputed king of medieval poisons. Writing in 1470, the physician Peter of Abano catalogued 70 different deadly substances, but arsenic towered above them all. In the 8th century, the Arab alchemist Jabir ibn Hayyan became the first to produce white arsenic, arsenic trioxide, by roasting a yellow mineral called orpiment. The result was a fine white powder that dissolved in liquid, had virtually no taste, and produced symptoms that perfectly mimicked common illnesses like dysentery or food poisoning. The fatal dose was roughly the size of a pea. Arsenic didn't kill quickly unless given in massive amounts. A single large dose caused violent stomach cramps, uncontrollable vomiting, and diarrhea, often followed by death from shock. But the real art, and this is what made skilled poisoners so terrifying, was administering it slowly. Small doses over weeks or months produced gradual weakness, confusion, and paralysis. The victim simply appeared to be wasting away from some mysterious illness. No medieval physician could tell the difference. There was no chemical test for arsenic poisoning until centuries later. Then there was monk's hood, also called wolfsbane or aconite. This beautiful purple flowering plant, once dedicated to the goddess Hecate, was one of the most violently toxic plants in Europe. Even touching the leaves with bare hands could cause numbness and tingling. Ingested, it attacked the heart directly, causing fatal arrhythmia within hours. Medieval Italian poisoners considered it one of their finest tools. Hemlock, the same poison that killed Socrates, grew wild across Europe. Its leaves resembled common parsley, making accidental poisonings disturbingly common and deliberate ones almost impossible to prove. Deadly nightshade caused hallucinations, seizures, and death. Even poisonous mushrooms played their role. Fly agaric, the red-capped toadstool steeped in milk to kill flies, was found in kitchens across Europe. Its symptoms could easily be mistaken for a bad fever, and many poisoners who used fungi must have escaped justice entirely. Who were the poisoners? Here's where things get complicated. Because unlike a stabbing or a beating, poisoning left no visible wound, no drawn weapon, no blood on the floor. It happened in silence, in private, at the dinner table. The one place in medieval life where people were supposed to feel safe. The horror of poisoning in the medieval mind wasn't just about death, it was about betrayal. Scholar Frank Collard, who studied roughly 400 cases of alleged poisoning between the years 500 and 1500, found that the crime was considered uniquely monstrous precisely because it involved secrecy, preparation, and the violation of trust. In a world where violence was measured by swords, clubs, and blood, poisoning operated outside those rules entirely. It was a crime committed during meals, in a culture where sharing food symbolized friendship, hospitality, and loyalty. A sudden death by poison also denied the victim their final confession. In a deeply religious age, that meant potentially condemning their soul as well as ending their life. Roman law, which heavily influenced medieval legal thinking, considered poisoning worse than killing with a blade. Emperor Antoninus declared that killing by poison was more serious than killing with a sword. Throughout the medieval period, the crime, called veneficium in Latin, was tangled up with accusations of sorcery and witchcraft. Women were disproportionately accused of poisoning, though the evidence suggests men committed the crime at least as often. Women operated in domestic spaces, the kitchen, the sick room, where they had easy access to food and medicine, and the secretive nature of poisoning aligned with cultural assumptions about femininity. But this connection was more prejudice than reality. The actual poisoners who appear in the historical record came from every level of society. Servants poisoned masters, wives poisoned husbands, monks poisoned abbots, nobles poisoned rivals, and at the very top of the hierarchy, popes and cardinals allegedly poisoned each other with astonishing regularity. The Borgias and the art of political poison. No discussion of medieval poisoning is complete without the Borgia family, though their reputation may be somewhat exaggerated. Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, and his children Cesare and Lucrezia became synonymous with poison. Their alleged weapon of choice was a mysterious substance called cantarella. Cantarella was described by the Italian physician Paolo Giovio as a whitish powder with a pleasant taste that resembled sugar. Served in wine at dinner, it reportedly could be calibrated to kill in a day, a month, or a year, depending on the dose. Most historians believe its primary ingredient was arsenic, possibly combined with other substances like cantharidin, a toxic compound derived from blister beetles. The Borgias allegedly deployed poison against cardinals, bishops, and nobles, incorporating it into drinks, clothing, gloves, and even book pages. According to legend, Lucrezia wore a hollow ring that concealed cantarella, allowing her to discreetly dose someone's wine at banquets. The most dramatic chapter came in 1503, when Pope Alexander VI and Cesare reportedly fell victim to their own poison after a servant brought them the wrong bottle of wine. The Pope died. Cesare, desperately ill, supposedly had a mule slaughtered and climbed inside the warm carcass, following an ancient folk belief that entering a dead animal's body could ward off poison. He survived. Modern historians caution that much of the Borgia poisoning legend may be exaggerated by their political enemies. The inability to detect poisoning chemically meant accusations were easy to make and impossible to disprove. Many sudden deaths attributed to Cantarella may have been caused by malaria, typhoid, or other diseases. But the legend endured because it captured something true about the era. When you couldn't prove a poisoning, you couldn't disprove one either. How authorities fought back. Medieval authorities understood the threat and tried to contain it, with limited success. Regulations targeting the sale of dangerous substances appeared across Europe from the 13th century onward. In Barcelona, in the 1370s, legislation prohibited apothecaries and their assistants from selling arsenic to anyone other than a recognized medical professional. The fine for breaking this rule was 500 sous, a devastating sum. In Valencia, anyone selling arsenic was required to record the buyer's identity. Anti-Semitic laws in Valencia specifically prohibited Jewish residents from buying or selling arsenic under penalty of a 1,000 sous fine, or the loss of a hand, a cruel regulation rooted in the vicious and baseless conspiracy theory that Jewish communities were poisoning Christian wells, an accusation that intensified catastrophically during the Black Death. In Paris, royal statutes from 1353 required apothecaries to be literate enough to read prescriptions, outlawed the sale of poisonous medicines, and mandated that all remedies be labeled with their preparation date. Inspectors visited every shop at least twice per year. But these regulations had enormous holes. Arsenic remained freely available as rat poison. Poisonous plants grew wild everywhere. And the fundamental problem persisted. There was no way to chemically detect whether someone had been poisoned. The wealthy developed their own defenses. Employing food tasters became standard practice among the nobility. Pope Boniface VIII, who had no shortage of enemies, insisted that all beverages be opened and poured under his direct observation. He used special utensils called asazum, shaped like unicorn horns or forked serpent tongues, that were believed to indicate the presence of poison. The very piece of furniture we call the credenza takes its name from the credence tests applied to food and drink before serving. The medieval obsession with poison detection spawned an entire market for supposed antidotes and detection tools. Narwhal tusks, sold as unicorn horns, were considered perhaps the most powerful defense against poison. They were valued at 10 times their weight in gold. Entire goblets were carved from them, on the belief that poison touching the horn would cause it to change color, sweat, or even explode. Queen Elizabeth I later paid £10,000 for one, roughly the cost of a castle. Toadstones, actually fossilized fish teeth, were set into rings because they supposedly grew hot or changed color near poison. Shark teeth were mounted on drinking goblets. Bezoar stones, pulled from animal stomachs, were carried as universal antidotes. Remarkably, some of these remedies had a sliver of scientific truth. Clay from the Greek islands contained silicate particles that could bind to metal-based poisons. The calcium carbonate in fossilized shark teeth could neutralize certain toxins. And the ancient practice of ingesting small daily doses of poison to build immunity anticipated the concept of acquired tolerance by nearly 2,000 years. What happened when you got caught? If the methods of detection were unreliable, the punishments were anything but. Poisoning was universally regarded as the most treacherous of crimes, a cowardly act that denied the victim any chance of self-defense. Accused poisoners were frequently subjected to torture to extract confessions, though Collard's research found that convicted poisoners only rarely suffered the very harshest penalties. When authorities did make examples, the results were horrifying. In 1442, Sancho Calvo, a textile worker in Valencia, used arsenic to murder his daughter and her grandmother while sickening several other family members. He mixed poison into candy, wine, the family well, and even the medicine his daughter was given to treat her illness. Under Valencian law, killing a close relative meant being buried alive beneath the victim's body. Calvo was sentenced to be buried under his daughter's corpse, and then, while still alive, dug up and hanged. The most infamous punishment specifically for poisoning came from England. In 1531, a cook named Richard Roos was accused of poisoning a meal in the household of John Fisher, the Bishop of Rochester. 2 people died after eating the tainted soup. Rose claimed he had only added purgatives as a joke, but King Henry VIII was unconvinced. The king personally pushed Parliament to pass the Act for Poisoning, which reclassified murder by poison as high treason, punishable by being boiled alive. On April 5, 1531, Rose was taken to Smithfield in London, chained to a gibbet, and lowered repeatedly into a cauldron of boiling water until he died. A contemporary chronicle recorded that he roared terribly, and that pregnant women in the crowd fell ill and had to be carried away. Only one other person in English history suffered this punishment, a servant named Margaret Davy, boiled at Smithfield in 1542 for poisoning her employer. The law was repealed in 1547. Why this still matters? Medieval poisoning reveals something fundamental about the era. In a world that celebrated martial valor and open combat, poison operated in the shadows, invisible, patient, and devastating. It turned medicine into murder and the healer into the killer. And it thrived because the gap between what could be suspected and what could be proven was vast enough to hide almost anything. The paranoia was real. Inventories of medieval lords brim with supposed antidotes: unicorn horns, snake tongues, bezoar stones, purchased at enormous expense against threats that could never be confirmed. Kings maintained private kitchens where their cooks swore oaths of loyalty. Nobles employed tasters who pressed napkins to their lips before their masters used them, in case the cloth had been soaked in something lethal. And yet, despite this constant anxiety, the medieval period also produced the earliest serious attempts at toxicology. Physicians like Avicenna and Pietro d'Abano wrote systematic treatises on venomous substances, laying groundwork that would eventually evolve into modern pharmacology and forensic science. The medieval poisoner operated in a world where a single pea-sized dose of white powder could reshape a family's fortune, alter the course of a papal election, or end a political career, and where no one, from the king to the beggar, could ever truly be certain that the wine in their cup was safe. If you enjoyed this look into one of the darkest corners of medieval life, hit that like button and subscribe to The Medieval Worker for more deep dives into how people really lived, worked, and sometimes died in the Middle Ages. What other dangerous medieval occupations would you like to see covered? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.